Hello everyone, I'm Liz Ferrier, and today I'm going to be discussing the biblical theme of suffering as seen in the Old Testament and relating to the New Testament. Now, there are many reasons behind why believers may suffer as seen in the Bible, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to go over two today, those being because of consequences for our actions, as well as for our own edification and growing closer to God. Now, for the first one, those being consequences for our actions, I would like to take a look into the story found in Ruth. In this story, a man from Judah leaves his hometown and goes to sojourn in Moab. He brings his family, and his two sons end up marrying Moabite women. Later, these men die along with the father, leaving just Naomi, the mother, and her daughter-in-laws. Now, while the Bible doesn't expressly say that the reason that they died was because they left Judah, this did show a complete lack of trust in God. And when Naomi and Ruth returned to Judah, they were blessed immensely. Ruth ended up marrying Boaz, and they had a son named Obed, who was the grandfather of David, which put them in the line of Christ. Now, the next reason that we can find for suffering in the Bible is for disciplinary action in order to help us grow as believers. This is seen in Deuteronomy 8, verse 2, which states, "You shall remember all the way which the Lord your God has led you in the wilderness these 40 years, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not." Then in verse 5 we read, "Thus you are to know in your heart that the Lord your God was disciplining you just as a man disciplines his son." Now, the word discipline here in the original text is the Greek word yasar. Now, this is used 94 times in the scriptures, and a third of those times it is used in order to show that God was disciplining believers to help them grow in their faith. As you can see, this is a major biblical concept. To relate these to the New Testament, with the story in Ruth, we can relate it to the story of Ananias and Sapphira, who died because they lied to the Holy Spirit about the amount of money they were giving to the apostles. Now, to relate the story in Deuteronomy, we can look at what Paul said in 2 Corinthians 12:7, when he talked about his thorn in the flesh. He said he had this thorn in the flesh because he needed to increase in his humbleness. The Israelites were to increase in humbleness by going through their wilderness wanderings, and Paul had to increase in humbleness by having his thorn in the flesh. So how should believers respond to this today? Well, we are told in Romans 5:3-5 that we should rejoice through tribulations. It says to exult in tribulations, knowing that tribulation brings about perseverance. So to review, we have discussed a couple of different reasons behind why believers experience suffering, those being consequences for our actions, as well as disciplinary actions to lead to growth. Now, as a word of encouragement, I would like to quote John 16:33, in which Jesus says, "These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world." So although we do experience suffering today, someday we, as believers, will be with Christ and not experience any more pain or suffering. Thank you.